Hey, how you doing? Justin here. In this lesson, we're going to talk about strumming mechanics for beginners. So exactly like how your arm should sit, the angle it should sit, where the motion comes from. Is it your wrist? Is it your arm? All of that sort of stuff. I think having an understanding of that can really help a beginner on their journey. So it's slightly different for acoustic guitar and electric guitar, but I'm going to take you through both. Okay, so starting off with acoustic guitar, first thing you want to realize is that your arm's going to sit on the guitar, on the top of the guitar, so it's nice and relaxed. You shouldn't be kind of floating away from the instrument. That'll cause you a lot of tension in the shoulder, and you really want to be as relaxed as possible. So your arm sits on the acoustic guitar in a nice, relaxed way. So find a little spot where it's kind of totally relaxed, sitting on the instrument. Now, it's important to realize that part of this placement is to hold your guitar sturdy, okay? You don't want to be holding the guitar up with your fretting hand at all. Okay, so it should sit the same when you're doing your chords as when you've taken that hand off altogether. So it's the shape of the guitar there, the way it sits on your leg, and the pressure from that arm that'll hold the guitar nice and firmly in place. Okay, so it's an important thing to realize first of all. Now, the actual motion when you're strumming as a beginner should be your forearm. Now, there are techniques later on where you use your wrist, where it becomes a lot more like flicking water off your hand, particularly if you're strumming real quick. But my recommendation for beginners is that you get into this idea of it being a forearm movement. So what we're looking for here really is from the elbow all of the way down right to the thumb is a straight line. Okay, the pick is going to come out the side of the thumb. So the motion there with the hand stays more or less parallel to the guitar all the time. Okay, so just get used to that without strumming the guitar first of all. Just try and get used to that feeling. It wants to be as relaxed as possible. Of course, you're going to require some muscles moving to be able to create the tension to make your arm move, but it wants to be as relaxed as it can. It doesn't want to feel all tight and tense. The strumming will sound horrible and tight and tense, and your pick will keep getting stuck in the strings if you're like that. You want it to be just really as relaxed as you can possibly get it. Okay, really feel like almost the down strums are almost like your hands just dropping down. Then you use a little bit of muscle to bring it back, and then it's dropping. Wants to feel really that relaxed. Okay, it's a really important part of this beginner journey is getting your strumming mechanics feeling good. Okay, now another part of that is how hard you hold the pick and how you hold the pick. So if you're following my guidance here, the pick should come out the side of your thumb. Okay, now it wants to be at a little bit of an angle to the strings as well. If the pick is square onto the strings, it kind of jerks through a little bit. It'll keep getting caught. The worst is if it's angled like this and then you go for a down strum, it's just going to pull into the strings, okay? So it wants to be kind of parallel first of all and then slightly pointing down, slightly away from you. I think that's going to be a really important little movement. Just that little bit, so often just bending the knuckle of your thumb just a little bit can make a huge difference. And then you'll see now that the pick hits the strings at an angle, and therefore it's not going to get caught. Okay? It's such a little subtle difference. Just the movement of that thumb from there to there means that instead of the pick being flat on, that little bit of angle means the pick will glide over the strings rather than potentially getting caught in the strings. You'll find it can just glide through. It doesn't want to be too much. It's not like 90 degrees. It's like maybe 20 or 30 degrees to the strings. Now, once you've got that, a really good exercise to do, just a little bit on your own. It's not like you have to practice it every day, but just making the motion down and up over the strings like that, making sure that it's not coming from your wrist. There's not too much twisty stuff going on here. There's coming from the forearm and trying to keep it relaxed. Now, what you're going to find is if you hold the pick too tight, it gets all jerky again. So you want the pick to be so loose, like unbelievably loose. Especially for beginners, they worry about dropping the pick all the time. That's dead normal, and you probably will drop it sometimes. That's okay. But you want to feel the pick as loosely in your fingers as you can. It's one of the reasons why I suggest for beginners that you start with a very, very thin pick, the thinnest you can find. Because if you hold your pick too tight, it's going to get jammed and caught in the strings and always feel really jerky. A real thin pick is much more forgiving and won't do that. Long term, you want to hold the pick lightly so that I can use a thicker pick and it still glides over just as well. Okay, but just so you're understanding the reasoning here. So really early stages, use as thin a pick as you can for strumming because it's forgiving. And as you get a bit better, you want to use a thicker and thicker pick so that you can control the volume and you control how you play much better with a thick pick, but it requires a lighter grip. And that's often hard for beginners. As it is, you're going to find the pick moving around in your fingers and you're going to have to stop all the time and go like reset it because it'll be pointing in the wrong direction. It's all normal, nothing to worry about. We're going to talk a little bit more about that further on down the line as well. But just for now, I want you to concentrate on the straight arm, motion from the wrist and angling the pick just a little bit on the contact with the strings and being aware of not gripping the pick too tight. Like I said, we'll discuss a little bit more detail about how that works later on, but just for now, not too tight and use a thin pick. Okay, I'm using my kind of the thicker pick. I do actually have, let me reach over and grab that now, a super thin pick. So this is, it's essentially like a piece of paper. It's completely bendy. And with this one, I can hold it as hard as I like and it still doesn't get caught up in the strings, okay? Because it just bends flat, So that's the reason I think this, the super thin pick is really great for beginners. I'm struggling. I'm like 4 or 5, 6 weeks into my beginners left-handed lessons, and I find if I use this orange pick, it's just feels really awkward, even though I exactly know what I should be doing. Right? I really deeply know that I shouldn't be holding the pick too hard. I still struggle with it. Okay, but the sooner you can be aware of that, the better, and the sooner you're going to start getting it right. So let me talk you through a little bit about the difference now with electric guitar, because it's the idea is the same, the concept's the same, the movements are the same, but you don't have this rest for your arm. So it's one of the reasons why I really find it uncomfortable to play with a long shirt on or something, a jumper, because you want to have a little bit of grip here of the forearm on the guitar itself. Okay, so your arm sits on here and it kind of moves on the guitar. Okay, it's why you often get a little bit of wear on like relic guitars or old vintage guitars. You get a lot of wear on this part of the guitar neck because your arm kind of sits on it, and it's the grippiness of the skin kind of holds it in place because you still want the shoulder to be nice and relaxed. You don't want to be doing like this, strumming like this away from the instrument with nothing, with your elbow floating free, because it'll get really painful. You'll get far too much tension in your shoulder, probably end up really badly injuring yourself. So it just sits loosely on the guitar like this. So there's a little bit of grip, and then it's exactly the same motion. So it's still parallel to the strings. You're still thinking about that slight angle there with the pick. Okay, that's it. All of those things are the same. Still thinking nice and relaxed all the time. You can see that the motion, instead of it being like sitting on it, is just like sitting on the top like we get for an acoustic guitar. It's just sitting on there. There's a touch more tension. I can just, because I'm trying to be really aware of it, there's a little bit more tension there in my shoulder holding my arm in place, but not much. It's just not quite as relaxed as on an acoustic guitar. But definitely that's part of the reason. You should just try putting a jumper on and see how your hand's unable to kind of sit in the right place. I have seen guys that kind of rest their forearm a little bit more on there. So it does feel a little bit more rested. That doesn't really work for me. We are all different. And that's kind of an important thing to realize as well, is that every one of us has a slightly different anatomy and a slightly different comfort, different levels of flexibility and all that sort of stuff. And that does all play together. It might not seem like a really big deal, and it's not, but there are subtle things that you might find easier one way than somebody else, and that's okay. Music is an art form. We're all individuals. It's all expression and all of that sort of stuff. And so I try and give you what I think is the best general guidance for most of the people most of the time. But everyone's going to be slightly different. You might find that sitting up on the acoustic guitar is a bit too difficult, or you might have a real small body acoustic guitar, in which case it doesn't work. You end up with, you're strumming right up the neck too far if your guitar body is too small. You might find that you're quite little if you're a young learner. Your arm's little enough that you can rest on the acoustic guitar, on electric guitar. Or if you've got a bigger body electric guitar like a 335, you can probably rest it on the top. So there are loads of different variables on here. Part of it is I want you to explore it on your own. And if you're aware of the idea of this forearm movement for the strumming and the angle of the pick and the parallel with the guitar, those mechanics, you should be able to adapt the correct mechanics to whatever your situation is.